My roommate Ethan was extremely superstitious. He always watched those dumb ghost shows on TV. He read his horoscopes every morning. For the record, he's a Leo Virgo rising, whatever that means. I only know that because he talked about that stuff all the freaking time. He was a great guy, but I hated how new agey he was. Last month, I was on eBay looking for this vintage toy that my brother wanted for Christmas. It ended up being way out of my price range, so I started browsing eBay for whatever looked interesting. I didn't find anything at first, and then I saw it. Some lady was selling a haunted candlestick for $40. The description said that it was from the 1880s. Its original owner bludgeoned her husband to death with it. After that, everyone who owned it died a seemingly accidental death. The seller wanted to get rid of it right away. Obviously, this was a scam. She was probably selling dozens of watches and lamps and stuff, all with similar fake backstories. Before I dropped out of college, I was a marketing major. I knew a sales tactic when I saw one. But it was only $40, and I knew that I could use this to mess with Ethan. So I took a screen capture of the listing, including all the spooky description, and I sent it to Ethan. Then I placed my bid. In less than a minute, Ethan responded with a text. "What kind of psychopath would buy that?" I messaged him back with a one-word answer. Me. He immediately tried to call me. I knew that he wanted to beg me to cancel the order, so I didn't answer. He called 8 more times before he finally took the hint. I knew that my prank was working. I didn't even have the candlestick yet, and he was already freaking out. He ended up hurrying home a little early from work. Like I'd expected, he begged me to not bring that cursed object into the house. I calmly told him that the candlestick would be in my possession. I'd keep it in my room and he'd have no contact with it at all. He knew that was the most I was willing to give in, so he begrudgingly accepted. The next morning I found out that the seller had accepted my bid, and then 4 days later the package was sitting on our front porch. I was worried that Ethan would secretly get rid of it before I could see it, but thankfully I was drinking coffee on the porch when the mail arrived. I left all the other mail sitting on the ground, and I scooped up the package and brought it into the living room to open. Ethan saw what was in my hands and instantly left the room. I don't want to see it. The candlestick looked pretty normal. It needed a shining, but it didn't look demonic or anything. I took it to my room and placed it on my windowsill. Then I ran downstairs to tell Ethan that it was safe to come out now. He walked in glaring. "I can't believe you, man." "Trust me," I said. "Nothing's gonna happen." I was very wrong. When I woke up the next morning, the candlestick was lying on my chest. It had moved in the middle of the night. I was a little spooked, but I told myself that I must have grabbed it in my sleep. I put it back on the windowsill and went downstairs for breakfast. Ethan was standing in the kitchen, facing the other direction. He didn't move. "What's wrong?" I asked. He didn't say anything. I walked over and saw a bowl of eggs on the counter in front of him. One of the eggs was red and bloody inside. "That's an omen, man," he whispered. "Shut up," I told him, and made my breakfast. Nothing strange happened for the rest of the day. When I went to sleep that night, the candlestick was still sitting by my window. The next morning, it wasn't there. I looked on my carpet to see if it had fallen onto the ground, but I couldn't find it. I hurried out of the room to tell Ethan. I raced down the stairs faster than I should have, and my bare foot slid on something lying on the top step. I lost my balance and tumbled headfirst down the stairs. I don't remember falling. I guess I blacked out for a while. When I came to, I saw Ethan standing over me. He had the candlestick in his hand. "This was on the stairs, man. You tripped on this." Before I could say anything, I passed out again. An ambulance took me to the hospital. I was out all night and well into the morning. When I woke up, Ethan sat nervously by my side. It looked like he didn't sleep at all. The doctor told me that I cracked 3 ribs and broke my arm. I also had a concussion, which he was most concerned with. After he was done explaining my recovery process, the doctor left. Ethan stood by the side of my bed and asked me, "Can I get rid of the candlestick now?" The logical answer was yes. The stupid thing was the reason I was in the hospital. But if I gave in now, then I'd be admitting that Ethan was right all along about his superstitions. I couldn't let him hold that over my head for the rest of our lives. So I said, "Just stick it back in my room, please." He looked like he was about to scream, but he stopped himself. I ended up staying only one more night at the hospital before they let me go back home. True to his word, Ethan had left the candlestick on my windowsill. He helped me get around the house and went shopping for pre-made meals since it was too hard to cook with one hand. He was a really big support, and he was genuinely concerned with my well-being. I couldn't think of a better friend, which made me feel guilty for trying to prank him. I didn't believe in cursed objects, but maybe I believed in karma. I deserved to break my arm for being such a bad friend. That night, I decided that I was going to get rid of the candlestick in the morning. I went to bed early. Usually, I'm an extremely heavy sleeper. Ethan always joked that I could sleep through anything. But with the pain in my arm and chest, I woke up in the middle of the night. And that's when I saw Ethan sneaking across my room. I didn't move because I didn't want him to know that I was awake. I watched him grab the candlestick and then place it on the very top of the bookshelf next to my door. He balanced it halfway over the edge because he knew that I would bump into it like I always do. He wanted the candlestick to fall down and hurt me. He was the one moving the candlestick all this time. He was the reason I fell down the stairs. Why? Was it because he was so desperate to prove that curses were real? Was that the reason he almost killed me? Ethan crept out of the room and then closed my door without making a noise. I was furious. I wanted to charge out of there and confront him, but I was in too much pain to leave the bed, so I just laid there and tried to sleep. The next morning, the first thing I saw was that candlestick sitting precariously on my bookshelf. I got out of bed, took more pain medicine, and then walked to my shelf. I moved very slowly so I wouldn't accidentally knock the candlestick over. Then I grabbed a mousetrap that I had on a lower shelf. I spun the trap open and carefully placed it next to the candlestick. Then I opened the door and walked downstairs. Ethan was already in the living room. "Feeling okay?" he asked. I pretended to be scared. "The candlestick moved again. You were right." He smiled, proud of himself. His plan had worked, or so he thought. "It's brave of you to admit that." "Can you get rid of it for me?" I asked. "It's on my bookshelf." "No, I don't think." "Please?" I begged him. He gave in and started up the stairs. I waited for a few seconds until I heard my bedroom door creak open. Then I heard the snap of the mousetrap followed by a loud thud. I smiled to myself knowing that I'd finally gotten my revenge. I waited for Ethan to scream and run downstairs, but nothing happened. The whole house was silent. "Ethan?" I called out. He didn't answer. I walked upstairs, looked into my bedroom, and screamed. Ethan was lying on the floor, his finger stuck in the mousetrap. And when he fell, the candlestick fell too. It struck Ethan in the middle of his face, sticking out of a hole that it had made where Ethan's eye used to be. I called 911. Last March, I decided to host my first Oscars party. My friends and I were all huge movie lovers, and we really got into it. We'd bet on the winners, make cocktails themed to the nominated movies, and heckle all the actors in bad dresses. It was one of my favorite traditions. For years, we'd always done it at my friend Trey's house. He was an amazing host, but he'd always be stressed out the whole time. He was just so uptight about having a perfect party. So last year, I decided to make things easier for him by volunteering my place for the party. Everyone thought it was a great idea, and I was so glad that Trey would finally be able to enjoy the Oscars for once. I decorated my house and laid out a bunch of food and drinks that were themed to the movies. All the guys arrived in time to watch the red carpet. We all wore suits and ties just like we would have if we were really there. Trey was the last to arrive. He looked around my place and was really complimentary. He said he loved my movie-themed decorations. That meant a lot to me coming from him. We sat on the couch for a while, drinking and chatting. We watched the red carpet, of course, but we mostly just caught up. Our friends Tommy and David told us all about their trip to Cancun, and James had some really funny stories about his new roommate. Trey seemed uncharacteristically quiet, though. I assumed he was just enjoying the moment. The host walked onto the stage and we all got excited. He did his little monologue, and we were all having fun watching until Trey started to choke. He gasped and wheezed for a long moment, clutching his throat. He looked right at me, horrified. You poisoned me! His face got horribly red and his eyes bulged out of his head. Then his whole body collapsed back onto the couch. Within seconds, he was dead. Everyone started freaking out. Tommy and David both screamed and held each other, not knowing what to do. James started hyperventilating. I was the only one brave enough to walk over and check for a pulse. I didn't feel anything. The room got silent for a long moment until James finally said, "Did you really poison him?" "Of course not," I said. "He ate and drank the same things we did." That was not the right thing to say. Tommy started screaming again. "Oh God, are we poisoned too?" "No one's poisoned," I declared. I pulled out my phone to call 911, but James grabbed my shoulder to stop me. "Are you sure you want to do that?" he asked. Of course I wanted to call 911. My friend was dead. But then James explained that if I had accidentally murdered him somehow, maybe by accidentally using an ingredient that he was allergic to, then I'd be arrested. And even if I weren't convicted, there'd be a huge scandal and I'd probably lose my teaching job. He was right. This was my party and I was responsible, but we didn't have any other option. Maybe you could just get rid of the body, Tommy suggested. I looked over at him, incredulous. How could he suggest such a thing? Trey was one of my closest friends. The horror of his death hadn't even sunk in yet. And now I had to consider dumping his body somewhere? No, I couldn't do that. I started dialing 911, but before I made the call, I decided to check the body one more time. I still didn't feel a pulse. Then I searched through his pockets and found an empty vial marked with some long, sciencey name. It looked like a chemical. But why would he have that? I read off the name and James Googled it on his phone. He read the Wikipedia article to us, explaining what the chemical was used to incite temporary paralysis. It slows down the heart rate to an undetectable level, mimicking death for about an hour before its effects wore off. Oh my God, I said. He's not dead at all. He fake poisoned himself to freak us all out. But why? It didn't make any sense. Then I realized it was all because of my stupid party. He wanted to upstage me. He was mad that I'd offered to host the party and wanted to bring all the attention back to himself. It was literally the dumbest, pettiest thing I'd ever heard. Slowly, my friends figured out the same thing I did. Trey had always been a dramatic person, so this seemed like something he would do, even though he'd never gone quite this far before. The ceremony continued on the TV, but no one was paying attention. We all huddled in the middle of the room trying to figure out what to do. We didn't need to call an ambulance because the effects would wear off. We could just leave him there, and when he woke up, we'd just pretend that we hadn't noticed. I thought that would be a nice way to handle the situation. He'd get infuriated if he thought that we didn't care about his stunt. But then I got a darker idea. Let's bury him alive, I said. What? James shouted. I explained that I had a trunk in my garage that was big enough for Trey's short, thin body. We could stick him in there, and when he woke up, he'd think that we freaked out and buried the body. When he'd start screaming, we'd let him go. Everyone liked my idea. It was twisted, but then again, so was Trey's prank. So I dragged the trunk into the middle of the room, and my friends helped me lay his body inside. I closed the lid. Then we all sat back on the couch and continued watching the show. We started having fun again. Honestly, I kind of forgot that Trey was even there. After an hour, we all heard movement in the trunk, then screaming and pounding. Trey had woken up. My friends and I just sat there, listening to him scream for the longest time. He was begging us to let him out, screaming that he was still alive. After several minutes of that, I walked over and opened the trunk. He popped out, frantic and sweating. "You buried me!" he shouted. I shrugged. He could see that he was still in my living room. He knew that it was all a big joke. but then he grabbed me by the shirt and got in my face. "You'll regret this, you ass! I've got more of the chemical, and when you least expect it, I'll give it to you. And then we'll see where you wake up." Then he wiped his face, glared at my other friends, and stormed out of the room. We all laughed about it, but every day since, I think about what Trey said. Is he really going to poison me when I least expect it? Would he actually do that? I've avoided him ever since, but I'm still scared. I don't go out to eat anymore. I'm always paranoid when I cook anything for myself. I'm just waiting for Trey to follow through on his promise. Rain lashed at the car's windshield, creating a thick veil of mist across the screen. Even with the windscreen wipers on full, it barely cleared one sheet of rain before another took its place, obscuring the road ahead. It was late, sometime after midnight, and the roads were empty. I had stayed behind at work to get some documents finished before the weekend, and time had completely slipped away from me. I was tired and desperate to get home, but I still had another 30 minutes to drive, and the rain didn't seem to be letting up. If anything, it was getting heavier, thudding against the roof of the car like tiny missiles. I couldn't keep driving in this. It was too dangerous. I kept going for another 5 minutes before the tires finally skidded on the slick road, and I decided it wasn't safe to keep going. I was on a backcountry road and nothing but trees surrounded me for miles, until I saw a sign up ahead for an off-road motel. I didn't plan on sticking around for long, just until the rain let up, but maybe they'd let me stay inside and grab a hot drink for a while. If not, at least there'd be somewhere to park my car for a bit. The car plugged along for the last mile until the motel came into sight, a little ways back from the main road. It was an old-fashioned looking building, gray and washed out beneath the stormy dusk. There were only a couple of other cars parked up, so I clumsily pulled into one of the spaces and killed the engine. Sitting in silence, I listened to the pounding echo of the rain on the windows and bonnet. It was really coming down out there. Part of me didn't want to get out of the car, but I didn't want to be sitting out here in the dark either. I'd parked fairly close to the reception building, so I just had to run a short distance and I'd be warm and sheltered. Most places like this had a vending machine for hot drinks too, so maybe I'd be lucky enough to get a decent cup of coffee to keep me awake. I waited for a brief lull in the downpour before throwing open my car door and pelting across the parking lot, towards the reception building. It didn't take long for the rain to soak through my clothes, and I wondered if I'd been better off just staying in the car, but it was too late to regret it now. I wrung the water out of my clothes and pushed through the door to the motel's reception. Inside was as old and grimy looking as the exterior, and I was disappointed to see no vending machine in sight. Maybe I'd been wrong about stopping. I should have just kept driving. A reception desk and a couple of tatty-looking chairs were the only furniture filling the small area. The lights were faulty, flickering at the edges of my vision, and there was nobody at the desk. The place might have seemed abandoned if not for the two cars outside. There had to be someone here. With a sigh, I turned around, intending to run back to my car when a voice spoke behind me. "Can I help you?" I gave a start, my heart lurching into my throat. I turned around to see a tall, gangly-looking man standing at the reception desk. Had he been there before? Surely there was no way I would have missed seeing someone like him. He had greasy black hair and dark, hooded eyes that watched me with a strange gleam. "Oh, sorry to bother you," I said, clearing my throat. I was just looking for somewhere to get out of the rain. Maybe, get a hot drink?" The man studied me carefully across the room. He wore a white button shirt that was stained around the collar, and a pair of black pants that looked a size too big for him. Everything about him screamed scruffy, but it was his eyes that bothered me the most. Dark and deep-set, watching me like a predator. "I can offer you a room," he said, his voice low, crackly like static. No, that's okay," I said quickly. "Maybe I could just stay here until the rain slows down." As soon as I said those words, I regretted it. Did I really want to stay here? In this grimy old motel with this strange man looking at me like that? Even as a man, he was giving me the serious creeps. The man inclined his head slowly. He said, and I realized he was agreeing to let me stay. Thanks, I said, walking over to one of the chairs and sitting down. Outside, a peal of thunder cracked across the sky like a whip, making me jump. Thunder didn't usually scare me, but maybe I was more on edge than usual. I could still feel the man watching me across the room, making me shuffle uncomfortably. So, you get much business out here? I asked, trying to break the silence and maybe make him do something other than just stare. Enough, he answered shortly. I shifted my feet. Overhead, the lights flickered off and on again, sending shadows scuttling across the room. When I looked up, the man had moved closer, stepping out from behind the reception desk. I swallowed thickly. Now that he was closer, I could smell something on him. Sweat, maybe, or grime. But also something else, something sharp and metallic. I flicked a glance towards him, and my gaze snagged something on his shirt. Something dark splashed on the white material. I felt my stomach twinge, but forced myself to think rationally. So what if he had some blood on his shirt? Maybe he cut himself or had a nosebleed. It wasn't that strange. So why is he creeping closer like that? Another voice whispered in the back of my head. And looking at you like that. I cleared my throat again. Sweat dribbled down the back of my neck. I stood up suddenly, which seemed to startle the man. He quickly recovered, looking at me curiously. He was much closer than before, almost close enough to touch me. You know, I think the rain seems to be slowing down, I said, marching towards the door. I reached for the handle and gasped when it wouldn't open. No matter how much I tugged on the door, it wouldn't budge. How was it locked? I hadn't seen the man go anywhere near the door to lock it. What seems to be the matter? The man asked from behind me, smugness dripping from his voice. Have you decided to stay after all? What the hell? Oh, open the door, I snarled, turning around to face him again. The man shrugged. You know, it's dangerous driving in a storm. You really should stay. I shook my head and turned back to the door, frantically tugging at the handle and slamming my fists on the glass. But of course, nobody was out there to help me. And even if there was, nobody would hear me over the sound of the pouring rain. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs as the man approached. He moved with a predatory grace, each step silent despite the drumming of the rain on the roof. Each second stretched into an eternity. The heavy air thick with the metallic tang of fear and something else I couldn't place. Just as he reached me, a deafening crack of thunder split the sky, plunging the room into darkness. In the momentary blackout, a sharp object pressed against my neck, sending a jolt of terror through me. Don't move, a low voice rasped in my ear, sending shivers down my spine. This won't hurt if you cooperate. He guided me towards a single lit candle on the desk, its flickering flame casting grotesque shadows against the wall. My eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but the door remained stubbornly locked. What do you want? I whispered, my voice barely audible above the storm's fury. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. A little company. He leaned closer, the warmth of his breath tickling my ear, his hand rough and calloused brushing against me. To my surprise, it wasn't a violent gesture, but a hesitant touch, almost questioning. Under the flickering candlelight, I saw his eyes properly for the first time. They weren't cold and calculating as I had initially thought, but filled with a deep sadness and a hint of fear. The thought sparked a flicker of something within me, a strange mix of fear and morbid curiosity. As the storm raged outside, the room inside became a scene of a bizarre dance. He, the predator, hesitant and unsure, and me, the prey, fighting a primal urge to submit to the raw, animalistic tension in the air. Our eyes locked, and in that moment I understood. He wasn't the monster I'd envisioned. He was a man, a broken one, seeking solace in the storm's chaos just like me. The line between predator and prey blurred. As the candle flickered and died, plunging us into darkness, I met his touch halfway, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. The storm outside continued its relentless assault, but in the quiet darkness of the motel room, a different kind of storm brewed. A storm of desperate need and unexpected connection. It was a storm of survival, forged in the crucible of fear, with an ending as unpredictable as the weather that had brought us together.
It was dark before dusk, a type of darkness that introduced blistering lightning across the sky. Thunderous booms like the voice of God had finally ended in a downpour. When I was much younger, I had lived for such nights because it meant that I was going to have a cozy night resting, tucked in the warmth of the shelter around me. But as a grown-up, it was an inconvenience at best and an irritation at worst, especially on nights when I had planned for activities. Becky was the first to call my attention to the rain, and she canceled. It felt like a dagger to my chest because I had planned for the evening to such detail that it felt like I had a mouthful of salt when the call dropped. "I'm sorry, Emily. Roads are usually slippery after the downpour, and I can't come," she said. The call dropped before I could negotiate some other means to get her to come. I felt so much dejection from that call with Becky that I didn't even feel like setting dinner up anymore for Sarah and myself. The odds that Sarah would cancel were high, so I didn't have my hopes up, and I didn't hear anything until late into the night. I tossed everything back into the freezer and set the house back to its original state before the evening. Then I tried to sleep, but it eluded me. It was the worst because it felt like torture that I could not escape. To be in such a big house and to be so lonely as it rained. God damn it! I cussed and picked myself up from the bed when I had enough of feeling pity for myself over the incident. I carried myself from the bed, and with a mind aimed at nowhere, I grabbed my keys from the counter and stepped out of the house for a drive. I hopped into my car, not knowing what the heavy downpour had for me, except for the fact that my mind was fogged with the loneliness, and I needed temporary escape from it. I was numb to the car engine revving with such animation, and when I put the car in drive out into the street, it was a blur until I caught something just within my lane of driving down the road. "Damn you!" I yelled as I swerved the car sideways, pulling on the wheel as hard as I could. The tires squealed on the wet tar, and the car drifted until it finally stopped when I slammed the brakes. The first emotion I felt was intense annoyance, carried over the disappointment of friends not showing up to a sleepover that I had organized. I was so overcome by rage that I wasn't thinking clearly when I stepped out of the car into the rain. The downpour felt like pellets on my skin. Still, I marched on until I was beside the person on the floor. He laid still, draped in a jacket that was drenched. My anger waned when I was curious. I wondered why anyone would be out in the open like this, laying down in the rain as he was. I assessed him before making a move on tapping him in the shoulder. "Hey, mister, are you okay?" I touched him, and he was stiff to the touch. My brows compressed in confusion. I tugged him on the shoulder, and he turned to lay flat on the floor, as white as snow from being beaten by the rain. In an instant, I could tell what was wrong. His throat was slashed, and the marks were as sinister as my worst nightmare. He had been so drained of blood, his skin patched. My body shook from the horror of what I saw. Fear was rapid, and it numbed me to my senses. Instinct kicked in, and all I could think of was escape from whatever this was, or whatever it was that killed him and slashed his throat. I stepped away from him, watching as the rain beat down on his dead body and washed the blood away from the crime. When I was a few feet away from him, I turned, and just beside my car was a figure, cloaked in the darkness, emerging with a smile on his lips. "Christ in heaven, what are you?" I cried as I backed up from the approaching figure. "Nobody. That is what I am," he said. Then, he went on to ask me what I thought about the rain, all the while insulting me by calling me a stupid pig. He said that I could have gone on my way, and we would have never crossed paths. He said it with a casualness that informed me that he was not just a regular murderer with an appetite for violence. I was dealing with a killer who had a crazed lust for it, just as one would have for food or a thirsty throat would long for water. 2 pigs in one night. You have no escape and you know it, he said as he basked in the rainy downpour, covered in the darkness of night. You know one thing about water? It washes away all dirt, including you. I turned and ran as fast as my feet would carry me. I felt every moment of my life roll into a reel that flashed before my eyes. Tears from my eyes flowed with the rain as it washed it away. It was a difficult thing to run away from death that so eagerly wished to consume me. I found my feet suddenly weary to carry me all the way home. It was a blur, and I lost all my senses, but for that one directional compass. The terror of my night, the one whose face I hadn't seen, chased after me so intensely that I fell on my face in the walkway. "Please," I begged, beyond all wits' end and desperate to live. My pleas were loud, but the rain drowned me out. It was hopeless with each breath that I drew into my lungs. I felt a curtain close around me. The things that mattered half an hour ago did not matter when I finally saw his face. His eyes were gray and deep, sunken into his bony face. His hands bore a cleaver, and he laughed hysterically as he ambled towards me. He begged more than you did, that little pig. He cried as I slit his throat. I had to taste some of his blood, you know, feel his fear. He whispered as he finally settled to take his prize. A rocket shot sent shockwaves through my chest. I watched him stagger, disbelief making my head spin. The bullet wound in the middle of his head dripped blood, which the rain washed away. He tumbled over and fell as I gasped. "Emily, are you okay?" Sarah called out, and I had never been more happy to see my friend. I rushed up and fell straight into Sarah's arms with relief. "He killed someone. He was going to kill me," I blubbered. "I call the cops," Sarah said. "Then we'll get to your car. Let's get out of the rain."
With every day that passed, of the month since my father died, I sensed my small world and my short life slowly grinding to an end. The first week had come with a sharp pain in my chest. The pain from heartbreak at such a devastating loss was so torturous that I, like a wounded animal dragging myself to the teeth of the predatory hands of death, did all I could to induce an end. I am certain I did not sleep more than a few hours the entire first week when my father had died, the man whose life was the universe and a person to me. On the 7th day of my father's death, I slept. I slept so much that my heart seemed to sense some relief. The second week replaced abjection with rage. My father was a man who had done so much for the people around him. He loved people just as he always said Christ loved us. Yet when he had suffered a heart attack, lying on the floor and clutching his chest in sheer agony, the ambulance had taken no less than 3 hours to arrive. I didn't know what to make of it. That cruelty of one man to the other because of the situation of his life. My father had always said that what a man lacked in materials didn't matter, but what he lacked in spirit did. I had kissed my teeth on that instance. My father had died because he was poor, so I started to loathe it. Every memory of my loving father riled my spirit, that in one moment of vexation, I knew I had to sell off everything the man owned if I were to find peace from the troubles of the old man's remembrance. I turned to the only place I knew I could rid myself of the properties: Facebook. The Facebook marketplace had been a decent place to trade some of my little possessions in the past, and they fetched a better sum than a yard sale could. I took out his possessions and photographed all of it, registering none of it as I started to post the images on Facebook for sale. I mulled over my loss on the 5th day of that second week when a prospective buyer had made an inquiry of a weirdly shaped instrument that they had seen. The comment was enthusiastic, almost encouraging in tone. But my confusion came from the fact that I did not remember uploading the odd instrument. The shape of it was like a cup, but not a regular cup. The spout was crooked and the tube was long. It seemed to have been made from steel, but from years of wear, it had turned into a strange fire-burnt color. The commenter asked if we could discuss the purchase of this privately. I saw no harm in it. After all, it was Facebook, and all sorts of weird bots lurked to ruin the experience of a good conversation. I agreed, and I sent the first message. The man replied with a greeting and introduced himself as Elias. The conversation progressed, and he asked how I had come upon the cup. I was reluctant, but with a little prodding, I revealed that it was part of my father's property that I wanted to get rid of. Elias asked why. I said my father was dead. Then there was heightened interest. Elias said he would be purchasing the cup and he could make the payment up front for it. I was pleased to hear it, and not realizing how much the cup was worth, I asked how much he was willing to pay. He hesitated. Then he came back with an offer of $25,000. I thought I had read wrongly. Another Facebook prankster, I sighed. When I did not reply, Elias upped the price of his accord, offering to pay $40,000. I went on with the conversation for the thrill of it, having no faith in the fact that my father had such a prize in his possession and lived in such dire state. I replied to Elias that I would receive the sum in cash, and I wanted $50,000 for it. Elias said that could be arranged. Then, we set up a meeting place at a local church at my request. Anxiety was usual, and I expected it, even though it overwhelmed me to the point of crippling me to my knees. I had grown up poor in my father's little house, and I was meeting with a man for $50,000 in cash for a weird-looking cup I could have given away for free. I thought myself a fool as I stood there in a quiet of dusk, scanning my environment for Elias's approach. When Elias finally came, I knew because Elias drove a very large dark SUV that intimidated his wealth, and he came alone. Elias approached with a somber air, and he started with his question. "Are you Adam?" I nodded positively. "Do you have the cup?" I paused, and then I nodded again. "Do you know what this means?" I did not, but I knew better than to concede my ignorance in the face of $50,000 in cash, so I neither denied nor affirmed. "Do you have any wife or kids that would take the cash?" Elias asked, and the air suddenly turned dark and intense between us as Elias pulled on his coat to reveal a shiny blade. "What do you mean?" I spoke for the first time. "You do know what you hold." Elias's brow jumped, and a sinister mien plastered across his face. I was at once apprehensive, sensing the menace that Elias presented. Elias's superior knowledge of something I did not know about the cup scared me. "That is the cup of communion itself," Elias gasped in a wide-eyed frenzy. "The cup that touched the lips of Christ in all its power. You agreed to lay your life like the Christ that this cup may pass to me, just like it has been done through time." "No!" I cried. Elias no longer had a friendly grin on his face. Instead, it was a smirk, a knowing smirk that he could outwit me and seize the cup. My trepidation manifested physically. I stepped back, racked by fright that made my bowels loose in my stomach. My chest thumped, and that sharp pain returned with an intense pang when Elias started to approach. His eyes were glazed with desperation. Every fiber of my being caught on fire, and terror wrestled control of my limbs when I tried to run. All of a sudden, Elias whipped out a blade from a sheath cleverly disguised beneath his clothes. The glint of the shiny metal caught the light for a brief moment before he sprung after me, charging forward with the weapon raised high. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled backward. In my haste, my foot caught on something. and with a loud shriek, I went sprawling to the ground. Elias also clumsily collapsed onto me with the blade unusually turned, poking the right part of Elias's chest. Mother... Elias gasped for air as the blade tore into his heart. I watched the man struggle for his life for a minute, living through the moment like a fever nightmare, and it was not until Elias was motionless that I took to my heels, escaping as far as I could from terror, which my mind would not process until the week after.
There was something fascinating about the salt shaker from when I had first seen it on eBay. I should have known I wasn't the only one who desired possession of such a beautiful piece. It had a tortured look, strange if I must say, as though whoever had created it had made it a piece of art, instead of something that should simply be used for its purpose. I thought about this compelling salt shaker for a few seconds, and I must confess, I tried to restrain myself from making a bid for it. I had bought a few stuff from eBay since I'd been in college. It was relatively cheap and at the tip of the finger, but this salt shaker was not something I thought I had needed. Even as I found myself on that sunny Monday morning when I should be working on an assignment that was due later that evening, tapping away on the bid icon for $5 whole. It was big money for a college student as I was, but I made the bid anyway. I did not feel excited or regret my purchase initially, and I'd gone about my days as I would after my auction had been selected by the vendor on eBay. Just as I was informed, I received my purchase via dispatch 3 days later, and it was there that my problems must have started from. I had no idea how long I had been watched as I went about on campus, but in days, I had observed a strange man following me. He was never too far behind, as I noticed. His chin was neatly shaven, as was his head, and he had hair only on his mustache and on his brows. I never spoke to anyone about it because I had assumed it was just a figment of my imagination that this man simply appeared out of the ordinary and seemed to be everywhere I was, following me about. Campus was big, and there were routes that I could alternate around, so I did. And in the first 3 days, I did not see the stranger around me or stalking me, but by the 4th day, like a persistent shadow, he was somewhere by the wall watching me. I have had enough, and I plan to lure him into a more comfortable space where I can question him and perhaps understand why he was following me. I made the route to my house obvious from campus. I made sure he was on my trail the entire time, even though I had tried to conceal my routes to him all the previous times I had noticed him. By the time I had made my way home, he was not far behind me, just as I expected, so I played to pretend a little more and slammed the door to see if he would knock with his inquiry. The idea of this small man who had started to stalk me out of the blue and being a nuisance was what plagued my mind, but somewhere in the deepest recesses of my mind, I had a sense of some danger, so I made sure to keep a kitchen knife close by the door. My heart started to beat quicker when I was alone in the house, waiting for this strange stalker to approach the door. I looked at the door with anticipation, and suddenly, almost with some excitement, I saw the handle of the door move. I suspect it did not move. It was yanked as though forcibly attempted. That was strange, I thought to myself. When he tried again, forcibly trying to gain entry instead of knocking, I knew something sinister was afoot. As terrified as I was of the consequences of a matter which I had no control over, I tried not to betray my terror when I approached the door. "Who's there?" I asked once I was by the door, with my hand on the hinge to stop him from trying again. "You have no idea who I am," he hissed, like a snake, and his voice traveled directly into my hearing as though the door were not between us. "I need the salt shaker, Alex." He knew my name? The blood in my veins ran cold. My heart stopped and my entire body was numb to sensation. The saliva on my tongue slinked down the back of my throat, and it felt like harsh rocks scraping straight for my belly. "Who are you, and why are you after me?" I asked. Immediately alert to my surroundings, I stared straight at where I kept the knife. Then I stopped. The salt shaker? He knew about the salt shaker I got from eBay, and he wanted it. I pressed my ears against the door, and all I heard was the sound of my own heart beating. The revelation made me dizzy. I knew I was in trouble, and it was trouble that I was not sure I can negotiate myself out of. "Open the damn door, Alex," he said, and what followed was the sharpest whack I had ever heard, the sound of a bullet flying through the door. It missed me by inches, and I stared at the hole in the door with disbelief. I hopped on my feet, and they did not fail me. I threw myself on the floor and crawled across carefully as he let off his gun again, 3 times in different parts of the door. I scurried to the corner of my room where I had kept the knife and grabbed it like my life depended on it, because my life did. I saw my life flash before my eyes when he smashed through the door with that determined stride. He announced that my life was worthless to him, but he needed the salt shaker because, like many of those who have bought the salt shaker, had taken part in the dirty game he set up, choosing themselves to be killed as it seemed. I could scarcely breathe, and I was sure my heart was beating so fast he could hear it if exhaled. I held back on my breath, and lack of oxygen made me frantic. He announced that he would find me, and he would kill me and everyone else who held the salt shaker. In that moment, I had deep regrets. A mindless psychopath coming after me because of a salt shaker I had purchased. I knew there was worse out there. "Come out, Alex. You only delay your moment of death," he said, and took a sweeping look around the room. With his back turned to me, I was overcome by sudden desperation. My life was in my hands, and I was never more aware of the terror of losing it if I did not act on the impulse and rush of adrenaline. His own life was in my hand, and the thought of killing a man made me wrench. The noisy gasp drew his attention to me, and staring in his eyes, I saw red. I launched myself and my knife straight at his back. The knife twisted, and his body went limp in my hands. I pulled back, and he fell to his knees first, and then on his face. My body was cold for a moment, but I managed to call the cops, who came around in an hour to remove his dead body from the floor of my apartment.
I was scrolling through Facebook one afternoon when a message popped up from someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. I'd met Jolene at a local cooking class a while back, but we never were close, and we didn't keep in touch since it ended. "Hey Haley, it's good to hear from you again. How's everything going?" I frowned and opened up the chat, wondering what she was talking about. Good to hear from me. I didn't recall messaging her at any time recently, nor did I bump into her anywhere. I assumed that she'd sent it to the wrong person, but she addressed it to me directly. I checked the rest of the chat, and it was empty. Jolene's message was the only one there, which was odd. There should at least be evidence of our old messages, but it had been wiped clean apart from Jolene's strange reply to a message that I never sent. "Oh, hey, yeah, it's good to hear from you. I'm doing well, thanks." I didn't want to outright ask why she was messaging me out of the blue, so I kept the message simple and vague. A couple of dots appeared as she prepared to reply. "About meeting up. I'm free on Tuesday if that works for you." My frown deepened. Meeting up? What was she talking about? Was I missing something here? I'm sorry, this is gonna sound weird, but what do you mean? I don't remember asking to meet up. My message might have been a little blunt, but I was getting confused. It was like there was another person involved in the conversation that I couldn't see. She did know it was me she was talking to, right? It took a few minutes for Jolene's reply to pop up. "Oh, you sent a message a few days ago asking if we could catch up over coffee. Don't you remember?" It wasn't a case of misremembering. There was no way I would have done that. I hadn't even thought about Jolene since last year. Why would I suddenly want to meet up? "I think there's been a mistake, sorry, but I'm glad you're doing well though." Jolene didn't send a reply back, so I put my phone down and tried not to think about it. Jolene must have gotten confused or something, but that wasn't the only strange incident to happen on Facebook. A few days later, I got a couple messages from my friends who were concerned, asking if everything was okay. I opened the message from my friend Megan first, feeling a strange sense of impending apprehension. Hey Haley, I saw your recent post. I just wanted to check in that everything was okay. XX. I bit my lip and swallowed. Recent post? I didn't post anything recently. At least not that I was aware of. Had I done it by accident? I went to my profile before I replied to Megan, but there wasn't any recent posts. What was she talking about? Hey Megan, what post are you talking about? While I waited for Megan to reply, I checked the other two unread messages in my inbox. Both were along similar lines as Megan's, talking about some post I put up and asking if there was anything that I wanted to talk about. I sent similar replies, asking what post they were talking about, because I didn't ever recall publishing anything to my profile. Megan's reply came through a few minutes later. You made some post about nobody missing you if you were suddenly to disappear. It made me worry is all. The apprehension in my stomach turned to dread. What was she talking about? I didn't do anything like that, and I never would. I didn't post that. I sent back to her. That's a relief. I was worried you were going through something, but I'm pretty sure it was under your name that I saw it. First, the missing messages with Jolene, and now some weird post on my profile. What was all this about? I had someone hack into my account or something? I said as much to Megan, who replied, maybe you should change your password just to be safe. Following her advice, I changed my password and re-logged into my profile. If someone was posting weird things into my account, this should stop them from doing anything else, or so I thought. A week later, Megan messaged me again. Apparently, I posted another strange encrypted message onto my timeline. And this time, she'd taken a screenshot of the post before it was taken down. The bodies are buried under the bridge. Come and get them. I felt sick to my stomach. What bodies? What was it talking about? And who posted this in the first place? What the hell is going on? I messaged Megan. I changed my password and everything. How come I'm still being hacked? I don't know, Megan replied, but it is creepy. Whose bodies are they talking about? I have no idea, I typed out despondently. Of course, that was before I watched the news later that evening. The news that would give me all the horrible answers I wish I didn't have. What are you going to do about it? Megan asked as I sat on my sofa, trying not to freak out about the thought of some stranger hacking into my account. Is there anything I can do? I'll try changing my password again, but if that didn't work the first time. But the second time that week, I changed my password on Facebook to something that I hoped that nobody would ever be able to guess. But I was doubtful that it would help. Maybe there was someone hacking in some other way, whoever they were. Hopefully they'll leave you alone, Megan messaged once I logged back in. Yeah, hopefully. I put my phone down, hoping to forget all about it, and turned on the TV. It was just after 6, so the news was on. I turned up the volume and felt a wave of nausea wash over me as the local news presenter went on to the main story. The bodies of 2 identified women were found this morning under a bridge in downtown Brooklyn, she said. Police are asking who was in the area that night on the 14th to come forward if they saw anything suspicious. Bodies under the bridge. Surely it was nothing more than a coincidence, including the fact that I lived downtown Brooklyn. There was no way that the person who hacked into my Facebook account was the same person who murdered these 2 women, right? My phone pinged, and I picked it up to see a flood of notifications on my Facebook account. What was going on? Why was everybody messaging me? I ignored most of the messages and went straight to Megan's since she was my best friend. Haley, check her profile, now. I did it as fast as I could, clicked on my profile, and a new post was put up. Barely a minute ago. This time, it was a picture. A bloody knife was in the frame, and though it was too dark to make out any details, the pale face of a woman covered in blood was just visible in the photo's periphery. I almost dropped the phone in shock and horror. This couldn't be happening. No way. Ignoring all the messages on my Facebook account, I immediately dialed the police. As soon as I was connected, I tried to stop my voice from trembling as I spoke. My name is Haley Denvers. And I think that whoever killed these women is downtown Brooklyn and somehow hacked into my Facebook account. Over the next few months, I was called by the investigating team several times. They took my statements and told me to keep watch. It's been 6 months since this incident, and I live under constant fear. My mind has stopped working, and I can't process it all. What do you think? Would you think that the killer would hack my account and try to frame me?